Right, and we're off on my first end grain cutting board. This was being made out of bits of wood that I had lying around the shop. They look a bit like firewood, and what they actually are is they're the pieces that come out the sides of the log or the edges of the log when I cut them up for bowls. So I've cut the pith out, dried them up. Obviously they've got chainsaw marks in, they're not square by any means. So the first job is to actually get them square, doing the bottoms, and then I'll do one side, get a nice 90-degree on the jointer. Oh, that is not a very big jointer and it's easy to push around. But as long as I get the 90 there, it should be good, and then I can take them over to the planer and get the tops parallel. Now I am making this, or I've made this for my son for Christmas, who's somebody who likes to cook, and what better present they have than a cutting board that's made out of free wood. Not that I'm tight or anything. So now I've got to get the tops down. Some of the angles were, it took a while to put some of these through there, cutting a bit off at a time to get them flat on top and bottom. But it was worth it. And again, as I said, it's free wood, and you don't get any better wood than free wood. So once I've got all of them down to have parallel tops and bottoms and one 90-degree side, I can start working on them on the table saw to get them down to long squares. There you go, another cherry's done. Over to the table saw. Now obviously these are all different thicknesses, so what I decided to do is I've set the fence 1 3/8 away from the blade, and then I run each one through as many times or as many cuts as I can get out of it. With the walnut particularly, I tried my hardest to make sure I ended up with as little as possible as that lighter sapwood in it, because obviously I want the darkness in the top of the cutting board. Some of them I got 2 pieces out, some are a bit wider, I got 3 pieces, but in the end I had more than enough. Which obviously meant that any bits that had got cracks or problems in them I could discard, which was rather nice. As I said, this is wood that's dried in my shop over the last couple of years, so it's not kiln dried, it's lying in the shop dried. And now the cherry. It cuts quite nicely. And again, 1 3/8 now width, and then I shall take them back around in a minute and put them through it again, 90-degree, turn them 90 degrees, and then I should have a square. Now I did notice when I was watching the video, and I didn't actually notice while I was doing it, I moved my table saw recently, and if you watch carefully it wobbles a bit, and I didn't actually notice when using it. Perhaps I was concentrating too much. There we go. So now they've been run through twice, 1 3/8 either way, they should actually be square. Yep, and that was a problem with one set of cherry, they were just thin enough to fool the hole. Yeah, walnut, this one I think I ended up with a piece with some sap in it, but I didn't end up using it in the actual board itself, although I still went and cut it down, just in case. I do like black walnut, it's probably my favourite wood of all time. I love the smell, I like the way it cuts, I like the way the colour of the bowls, and it certainly looks good in cutting boards too, whether end grain or edge grain. Right, gluing them up. So I ended up making effectively 3 boards, because the width that I was after, I only used 7 pieces of wood. Using an odd number to make a checkerboard, that means I have to make one board with walnut on the outside, and then cherry, then walnut, and then cherry in the centre. And then of course I've got to make another one with the opposing to that, so it'll be cherry on the outside, and then walnut, cherry, walnut. No? Yeah, whatever. Opposite to this one. Right. And whilst I'm gluing this up, if you like this video, please subscribe. I need a few more subscribers. I think when I started this video I had 236. I'd love to get it up to 237 or even 238. If you can help me there, if I'm already up to that number, don't feel shy about adding to it. So there we have it, that's one. I did put an extra couple of clamps on it, for the center. You don't need to clamp these boards too tightly, you just make sure that they've got a nice level smooth fit. Left it for 24 hours because it's type bond type 3, and now I'm going to scrape off the squeeze out on the bottom because I'm going to run these both through the planer to get them nice and smooth, just cutting off a very small amount, just to make sure that both sides, the top and the bottom, are smooth, because that's my next gluing surface after I've cut them down. And I really should put something on those black pipes to stop the glue pulling the paint off and leaving it on things. So there we go. Just making sure it's nice and smooth on both sides, and then I can cut it down. Now I didn't film it, but I quickly knocked up this cross-cut sled whilst making this, because I didn't have one, and it's going to be a lot easier to cut these in part with a cross-cut sled. So once I trimmed the ends off, make them nice and square, I can then decide which side's best to start, put a stop block in at 1 3/8 from the blade, and then I should end up with effectively loads of little cubes that are stuck together. So it should be roughly, or pretty much 1 3/8 by 1 3/8 by 1 3/8. Yeah, I made my sled guides a little too tight, so I'm going to put some wax or something on them, or sand them a little bit to make it run a little smoother for the next project. There we go. That's one pretty much done. All I've got to do is cut the next one up and then put them together, one from each one. Yeah, it's not very exciting to watch, is it? It was exciting for me, first time using a sled. Right, so back to the clamps. Now, this time, obviously I've got to take one from one board and then one from the next to get the checkering. Now this was a bit odd. I think I must have, when I put it on the sled, I must have been concentrating, because I ended up with two pieces with a very funny angle on them. So it hadn't cut them square. It was just the one, and if you put them, there they go, look there. So whether there was a bit of dust or crap behind it when I pushed it through, I don't know, but I perhaps ought to concentrate more on using the sled better. Next time I won't be quite so excited about it being the first time I've done it. Alright, now and there we have it. All I've got to do now is glue these up, and we're almost there. It's starting to look good. Using a different implement to spread the glue this time, which reminds me I really ought to get some glue brushes. But making sure I get it spread nicely across. I want these glued up nicely. Look at that. You gotta make sure you get them in line. And then clamped, and then next time I'll make sure that I'd move the tops down, so a bit of, again, it doesn't have to be overly tight, but obviously you don't want it too loose either. I put 4 clamps across, 2 on the bottom and 2 on the top, to make sure I got an even pressure across the whole thing. And it came out of the clamps. I put a little pencil mark on there just to make sure that I've got all the top smooth. I was a little concerned about going through the planer again because it can chip out the back, because obviously the grain is sitting up on these. And that's what happens, by the way, all that soot coming out of there is what happens when you don't turn the dust collection on. Obviously there's one slightly out of a line there on that side. Now the wonderful sanding. Took it down to 220 grit. So I started with 80, then 120, 150, then 220, just to make sure it was nice and smooth. Did the sides as well. Then I put it through my router table, which I didn't film, but if you look, there's some little handles underneath there now, and I really should have held that down while I'm using the trim router. That's just to put a slight curve on the corners. And I don't know whether it's, yeah, next time, Bruce, hold it down. Alright, and finally, I used walnut oil as the finish. And I just love the way that walnut and cherry pops when you put walnut oil on it. Look at that. Almost changes the colour completely. So, I did put some little feet on the underside of it, so it sits up a bit. And then gave it to my son for Christmas. As I said, free wood. If you enjoyed the video, if you've got any comments, press subscribe, leave me a comment. And as I said, I do a lot of bowls, I'll be doing more cutting boards and other stuff, so watch this space.